hence why this segment is called Still Figuring It Out.
Yeah.
Because we are literally still figuring it out. Hi, welcome to another episode of Still Figuring Out. I'm Rachel, and today's topic... See, I started the already. Today's topic is about traditions, independent women, and the importance of men's roles. Interesting. So, been having a few conversations, and I like to get lived experience. I like to talk about things that people have been through, that I myself have been through, and our own experiences, but also like to give history in regards to where things potentially start, where they begin to evolve, and where we are now. So, independence of women. I think I'll start there, actually. So, my friend in the studio, who's not going to be on camera today, when would you say that you first understood about the independence of women?
I think I realised from quite a young age, just from watching my mum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mum's married?
Yes.
And mother and father in the house together?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was it that indicated your mother was independent?
My mum has always been like a very, very hard worker, and I personally feel like as much as my dad maybe appeared to be the dominant one, I think it was quite clear in reality that my mum was the one that orchestrated and ran the household, organised the bills, and it was just very much the leader.
Okay. All right. So I had this exact same conversation yesterday, and I've been having this conversation for the past couple of years in regards to women's roles changing as they became more independent. So I initially had the conversation about where did independence of women start? Because there was a time back decades, hundreds of years ago, where women's roles were predominantly dependent on men. And when I say that, I mean that women needed men to be able to vote, because they couldn't vote. They needed men to be able to... So basically, I say that women needed men to vote. Women didn't actually need men to vote because they weren't allowed to vote. So they needed men to survive, in essence. So you got to a particular age, your parents didn't want you in the house, they had to marry you off to somebody that would look after you. As a woman, you couldn't vote, you couldn't work, you weren't allowed to work, and there were things that women were allowed to do and weren't allowed to do. So you weren't allowed to go into bars, you weren't allowed to go into pubs, you weren't allowed to frequent those kind of areas because they were deemed men-only areas. So when I began to look deeper into the role of men back then, men's roles were to take care of the home. Traditional roles were to take care of the home, to be the breadwinner, so earn all of the money that came into the house, to be the protector of the house. So if anything was to happen in the house, potentially they would be the person that would be defending the house. Men were also, I suppose they were the key forefront of society. So if war was to happen, they'd call the men. If there was an issue in regards to needing strength, they would call the men, they wouldn't call women. So just looking at those traditional roles, you can see clearly an indication of what a man's role was, what a woman's role was. So you were everybody understood their role, in essence. Now, I'm not entirely sure when things changed, but things changed. And I know that there are some events in life that happened that created a generational shift. And maybe it's not even generational, it was a societal shift in regards to women gaining independence incrementally. When I say incrementally, I mean bit by bit by bit. That level of independence away from the need for a man changed. Now, I remember having conversations with my grandmother about her parents and talking to a lot of elders about whether or not they actually liked the man that they had children with. And a lot more often than not, it was actually they were there, they provided, so we married them. It was quite interesting because I'm thinking, well, in today's society, could you imagine marrying somebody you don't like? But you need to, because you need to be able to survive, because your parents are going to can't maintain you. So I'm like, wow, this is interesting. We then have World War. All the men are called up to fight. It's the women left to, hold the mantle while the men are away fighting. But there still needs to be production that needs to go on. But all the men that used to work, because women couldn't work, they're all gone. So now there's a set of areas and expertise where women are going to step into. They're being called to arms. They're called to action. So now we've got women going into workplaces. We've got women going into bars and running them, because there are still some men left behind because obviously they couldn't go to war because they weren't fit enough, or they were unwell, or they were too old. There was still a service requirement for women. Women now are no longer just in the home taking care of children and taking care of husbands. They're now going out to work. They're not waiting for the husband to bring home the money. That money is now coming in through their own labour. This now identifies a self-independence, because I don't need my husband. I've been shown that I don't need my husband because I can earn money. This now begins a shift, because if I can work, that means I should be able to vote. We're talking 1912 now. So suffragettes came after the 1900s, like early 1900s. So where you've got that female entity into workplaces, and you've now got a reliance on female solidarity, you've got a whole different shift with men out of the picture. Now, not to say that there aren't policies and processes that have been put in place to continue the disruption of the family and traditional roles. We'll get to that later. But when you begin to look at where that level of independence truly began to start within the United Kingdom, United States, I would say that it was predominantly that juncture where women could go to work, earn their own money, and identify that actually where I needed that man, that need is no longer great apart from procreation. And I think that's where our issues really began. And I think that's where the idea of I don't need a man came from initially. The attitude came later, but the notion of actually I can survive on my own, because some of their husbands didn't come home. So imagine your husband goes out to war, you're now going to work, you've got a friend that can look after the children, you're earning money, you're running the household, your husband doesn't come back. You're going to maintain that stance. Now what happened is for some people, the men came back and wanted back their jobs. Women didn't want to give them up, because now I'm going to give up my own independence, because for certain women, they were controlled by the material. They were controlled by the financial constraints they were under, because they couldn't work and they couldn't enter into particular societies. So we then start to look at, is there a breakdown in regards to, or resentment about the men coming back, wanting them to go back into the household? Now, there are a number of women that would prefer to be housewives. There are a lot of women that would prefer to be housewives, so long as that the man would provide. But again, that shift, what happened is when women entered in the workforce, taxes increased. The level of tax revenue that went into the taxation system increased. Now, when an organisation or a country realises that more taxes are coming in, I'm not going to stop you working, am I? Because what I'm actually doing is building a coffer of financial and economic wealth. So now what we've got to do is now look at industrialization. We're going to start throwing up factories. We're going to start throwing up shops. We're going to start throwing up manufacturing capacities like cars and drinks and bottles and beer and breweries. So all of these things began an industrialization of rebuilding the country. Again, that's bringing Commonwealth people to the United Kingdom. So we're looking at World War II starting. Again, men going back out to war, women having to step back into those spaces again. So we've now got a resentment. You've sent me back home, but now you've gone back out to war. I've got to go back into the workplace. Now we're at the point of we want to be able to vote now. Then if that's what you're doing to us, we want to be able to have a say. In this time, there's an erosion of the male and female roles in regards to what is a man's role and what is a woman's role. Now, as my guest just said, mother ran the house. That was independence. Mothers always ran the houses. That was always the case. Men didn't cook, potentially. Some men did. Quite liked it, therapeutic. But a lot of men didn't cook. The role of the woman was to take care of that man that had been outside of that house, working and providing for that house. Now, yesterday I had a conversation with a young lady, and the first thing they said was, yeah, because my granny ran the house. Like, she wrote out what bills needed to be paid. She gave my granddad the shopping list, and he went out and did it. She was the one that cooked the meal. She was the one that kind of tidied up the house. And I said, perception is key, because if granddad did not provide the money for her to be able to write out what bills she could pay, if granddad did not bring that money to be able for her to put the food on the table and to cook it and to provide the gas and electric that needed to be able to suffice maintaining that food in a fridge or a freezer, or providing the food, the money to be able to go out and buy the food to put on the table, where would you be? We then start coming back into the importance of the roles in the household. The perception of running a house, meaning a woman is independent, is quite telling and quite important. Because the perception of running a house doesn't mean that that person's independent or that person is a sole entity, because without granddad, that couldn't have happened. And she made a point. She said, as much as my grandmother wrote out the bills and managed the house, when it came to dinner time and the roast was made, granddad was still given the meat to carve. Now, let me ask you, guest. Giving granddad the meat, would you deem that as a conference of power?
In some ways, yes. Because I think, even me as like a kind of young child, young adult, because I saw, for example, my mum working just as hard, or perhaps even harder, because she's still working full-time, she's still doing nights, but she still has the main responsibility of doing the housework, doing the cooking, maintaining the children, all of that kind of stuff. I think my kind of thing was, well, why does he get his plate served first? Like, what actually makes him so special above you? But then obviously as I got older, I just kind of realised that, my parents are a very traditional, old school Jamaican couple, and that's just how it goes, So I think I personally did have some angst with regards to that when I was younger, but then And as I got older, I just kind of realised, well, that's just kind of, how things go. Because was it necessarily the case that he was bringing in more money than her? I don't know that for a fact, but I don't really think so. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So would you say that because your mother did more, that you saw her as the main person in the house with majority of the roles? You saw her as more important, or did you see them as equally as important?
I saw them. I understood that in some ways they were equal. However, because I think maybe I saw a lot of irresponsible things that he did, and my mum having to clean up a lot of the mess of some of the things that he did, I always regarded my mum as, again, like I said, the leader, the more responsible one, the one that kept this ship going.
Okay.
And that was obviously at odds to, what you would see in the media, because you'd normally see the man as the breadwinner, the leader of the household. They kind of kept things on the straight and narrow. And the mother typically would, be the more kind of homely. I'm not saying mum wasn't homely, because she was, but she obviously had to adopt roles that traditionally maybe she shouldn't have had to because of his lack.
I hear you. What I'm hearing as well is that there was a traditional role played in the house. And I don't know about your household, but I know there are many households whereby, as much as the women went out to work and came home and still cooked, things like gardening, things like putting up shelves, all of the DIY stuff that takes place in the house was still done by the men. And I don't know about your parents' household, but in essence, those things cost a great deal of money. And if there's a man in the household that can do that, then there is a balance, isn't there? There is a role for that man to play. And as much as mothers may have gone out to work, is it because they wanted a particular lifestyle? If they didn't want to live a particular lifestyle, go on holidays and just wanted to feed the family and keep their roof over their head, would dad alone been able to do that and mum stay at home? So those are the things that are kind of what shaped our society initially and what gave birth to a rise of independent women thinking, well, actually, I can pick up the Yellow Pages or Dyer trade and somebody can do that. I don't need a man. And that moving into I don't need a man stage, I'm an independent woman, has caused a great deal of angst blame between men and women in regards to, well, I want a traditional man. So going back to our previous pod, looking at what is the role of a man when it comes to dating, into going out into the world, into being a husband, into being a boyfriend. Those roles, everybody has their own ideas of them and what standards need to be set. But there are a lot of quote unquote independent women talking about, well, I need a man to take me here. I need a man to pay my bills. Now, we're in a kind of catch-22 situation. Let's be real. Because you claim you're independent, you claim you don't need a man, but when you do get one, he has to do everything. Okay, let's try and work this out. You're not performing traditional roles in the household, but you want him to maintain traditional standards in regards to how the outcome of a date, a relationship will work. Now, this is the conflict for me. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody says, oh, you're an independent woman, Rach, you got your own job, you got your own house, you got your own car, like, you've raised the children. Okay. One thing I would never, ever attest to is being an independent woman.
Yep.
I won't attest to it. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is it wasn't by choice.
Yeah.
You see, if it was by choice, I'd be Beyonce and up the back. Oh, lady independent. I'd be on it. But it wasn't by choice. I got a job by choice because I like doing what I do. I like being in the workforce. I like learning new things. I like being able to make change for the better for people. I love to do that. However, if I had a husband at home that maintained, and I'd go out to work part-time maybe, and I could come home and look after the children I'd go to work while the children are at work, come home, cook dinner. I love to cook. Love it. I would maintain. I would. I'm not even going to lie. And kick me, kill me, I'm a pick me, whatever you want to say, I don't care. But there are a lot of independent women saying, I don't need a man. But as soon as you begin to date one, your first instance is, he needs to. He should. I want him to do. Now, when I'm hearing a lot of the women talking about what it is they want a man to do, you want him to lead. You want him to take charge. You want him to pay for the first date. You want him to take you on holiday. You want him to do manly things. But you're still screaming independence and you don't need a man and I can do this on my own.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
This kind of, I'm an independent woman trope. I would suggest that comes from, for many people, a long line of having a mistrust for men. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right in regards to a level of mistrust. What I'm mindful of is, where does the mistrust come from? Mm-hmm. What preceded that mistrust and what role they played in it? Because I find that more often than not, there are women who do not force their counterparts, their friends, to take accountability for the roles that they play in the mistrust. Mm-hmm. There are issues in regards to a woman having a man and feeling that just because he's in the house and she cooks and she cleans, that's enough to maintain that relationship. And I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. I think that communication, understanding, comprehension, growth, evolution, all of those things play a part in being able to maintain a relationship. When someone is not happy, people are not mind readers. And if we do not express our unhappiness or our issues in regards to our relationship, and when we're asked, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. But you're clearly not, and you're not willing to communicate why you're not. Then when the man decides, like, I don't really want to put up with this miserable cow every day, or I don't want to put up with this attitude I'm getting, or the feeling of tension in the house, I'm going to keep going out, that mistrust then begins to build. And I'm not giving rise to cheating, far from it, because he has to communicate too. Mm-hmm. But if he's asking a question and she's not responding, there's a breakdown in communication. And rather than just leave, people start this cheating thing. Yeah. And that's where mistrust starts. But mistrust is not only just about cheating. Look at when we had the pod with Fitz and the other. Mm-hmm. There was an agreement at the beginning of the relationship. If you haven't watched the pod, go to Love Laid Bare, please and thanks. But there's a mistrust in regards to when you set up that relationship, the agreements you are bound by when you get into that relationship. So if you say that, if you both go into a relationship thinking, okay, we're going to grow, we're going to build together, but one person is tearing it down and one person is still trying to build, and that person is not pulling their weight, there is a mistrust in that space too. So an independent woman, when I listen to like stories of yesteryear of our parents, our grandparents, I never heard my mum ever say, I'm an independent woman. Never. Now you got women out here screaming it. Mm. And for me, there are so many factors that feature into that independent woman ideal. And I think the ideal about I don't need, it's not about a need per se. It's about that balance. And that balance in regards to, well, if you want to start a family, you're going to need actually in this society.
In this day and age.
There's too many factors that are now playing out where someone can say, I can have a whole family and I still don't need a man. And what we're doing is eroding the importance of men in society by continually citing that trope of, I don't need a man. Like yesterday I asked the question, if you had a whole house of flat pack and you had a man, what would you do? So you've moved into a new house, you've got all these flat packs around the house. Is the expectation that he's going to put it together? What are you doing? First response was, I do it myself.
Really?
I was shocked. I'm not even going to lie. I was shocked.
Oh, no.
When I prodded further, it was, well, maybe we could do it together. And I'm like, Times have changed so significantly. It's unbelievable for me. At the age I'm at, I'm in my mid-40s, and I'm looking at the role men used to play back in my mum's age, my grandmother's age, and even towards the beginning of when we started dating. You look at the importance of wanting a man's man.
Yes.
I want a traditional man. I want a man to ask me on a date. I want a man to say, we are going here. I'll be picking you up at this time. Be ready for this time. I want those traditional ideals.
Okay, so just to throw a thought out there, I've noticed that, there are other races and cultures that still kind of uphold the traditional roles that men and women play within, relationship and a marriage. And from my perspective as a black woman in Western society, I feel like, black women in the West are the main ones that kind of wave this I'm an independent woman flag. So, and obviously, I think everyone should know by now that there are historic factors, socioeconomic factors that kind of play into that.
Most definitely.
Now, on top of that, black women, whether it be in the workplace, academically, are significantly excelling against their male counterparts. So in a way, I can almost see why black women have got to a point where they almost feel like, well, if bringing the money in is something that you can no longer do, but if I take you on, there's an expectation that I then still have to fulfill my traditional role as a woman in the house, but then I'm also having to kill it in the workplace because, let's be realistic, there's not a lot of men who have the same earning capacity. Now, obviously, I also do think we should all know by now that has been set up for a reason, right?
Of course, it's all by design.
Right. So, and sometimes when I speak to my girlfriends, I kind of suggest that, whilst it's probably unlikely that you're going to get this unicorn,
They're not unicorns, though.
No, but hear me out. When I say unicorn, what I mean is the majority of women I find, they want over 6 foot tall, with beard, has to drive a nice car, has to be earning a significant amount of money. Now, when you look at it statistically, in the UK particularly, your chance of getting somebody like that is very, very slim. There's too many women for that particular type of man, right? So what I often suggest is, well, can you not find a compromise?
Okay.
Yeah. Realistically, are you going to find a man that's earning £100,000 a year? It's not impossible, but for the amount of women that are looking for the same thing, based on what we've just said, how realistic is it? So now it then comes down to maybe compromising a bit more on, does he have to look like that? Does he actually have to earn that much money? How about shifting things to look at the values that the man has? You know, what are the skills that he can bring to the relationship? What are the things that you lack in that he can, you know, bring up, you know? But yeah, what are your kind of thoughts on that?
So I agree with you in regards to that there are different races and different societies within black culture that still uphold traditional values. But I think that there's a missing point, and you raised it in regards to it being by design. So when we look at a lot of the women that are looking for men that earn hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they want a man who's 6 foot, they want a man who drives a nice car, they want a man who's got his own house. There are a lot of women that are not taking into account the lived experiences of black men from a very young age. Because you mentioned that there are our black girls are out excelling, outperforming our young black men. Now, let's have it right. When they enter the school system, they're not outperforming each other. Yeah. Actually, black boys actually outperform young girls when they enter the actual schooling system. What ends up happening is, and if you look at the actual scope of black teachers and teaching within the United Kingdom, I can only speak from the United Kingdom perspective, but when you look at the actual schooling system and the teaching demographics, I think there was only like 3% that are black teachers within the whole educational system across the country, when actually black and minority ethnic make up nearly 18% of the United Kingdom. When you look at young black boys as they get to about 11, and even before they get to 11, there's a shift in regards to their behaviours, in regards to the level of trouble they're in. And there is research and indicative evidence to demonstrate that there is a bias against our young black boys. So there is research, and I can direct you to it. When you look at it, it shows that there are teachers that is an inherent stereotype and bias against black boys. So the study, for example, has 4 children in the room, 2 black children, 2 white children, 1 black boy, 1 black girl, 1 white boy, 1 white girl. And the teachers are asked to look for misbehavior. And what happens is their iris is tracked on the screen about where they're looking. Now, what happens is throughout the 20-minute experience of watching a video of these 4 children playing, all of the teachers, their eyes veer to the black boy continually, and they continually veer to the black boy. Now, for me, that is the beginning of a very, very detrimental scenario, experience, and journey for our young black men. Now, I'm not saying that all black men don't succeed. I'm not saying that they don't succeed through the education system, but let's have it right. When you look at our youth custody system, over 50% of them are black boys within the youth custody system. When you look at the expulsion rate and the pupil referral unit rate, over 70% of them are black boys within those spaces. And the reason on that basis is because of the biases that are happening before they even get into their formative years. You are looked at for misbehaving, and you're not even misbehaving. The white boy's misbehaving in the video. No one's looking at him. They're still looking at the little black boy who's happily playing away in the sand with his little truck. Now, for me, it isn't the only experiment that has been undertaken. There have been numerous ones, and it's continual. We then start looking at the curriculum. The curriculum does not include our black boys until you get to the point of slavery, where black boys are put into the curriculum and they're shown that they were not worth nothing. So apart from working for free and being whipped, butt broken, raped and sold. So let's have it right. When women are looking for men who are in 9-to-5s that earn £100,000, they're going to be unicorns, because the lived experience demonstrates they were never given a fair opportunity to get to that point in the first place. Now, I'm not turning around and saying you have to lower your standards, but women play a great role in regards to what men will do. And if men, for example, don't have the fair opportunity from an educational perspective up through the system, when you're expecting hundreds of thousands of pounds, men are going to sell drugs, men are going to do fraud, men are going to do things to try and meet the requirements that you are setting.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it has to be said. So I'm not saying to lower your standards as women, but what I'm trying to say is when you're asking for unicorns, Understand that your unicorn is a unicorn because they've never been given a fair chance from the get-go. And if they don't have supportive parents, who don't have parents who have the level of education to get them through the system, or they don't have a village to help raise them, let's be real. Not just the education system, but the housing system, the social system, the benefit system. Everything is geared towards women. Everything. Even down to when you go into a courtroom and a man is fighting to see his child, more often than not, it's the woman's side that the judge takes. So let's have it right. Now, and as I said before, I couldn't care less if anybody thinks I'm a pick-me. I've got 3 boy children. And what I will not do is have a woman place unrealistic expectations on them for them to try and meet those because you feel that that's what you want, but yet you're not looking at the experiences that they've had to be able to get to that unicorn status. We have to start looking at the deal breakers and the compromises that we are willing to take, and not be so judgmental on a man who hasn't reached his full capacity or full potential without asking or digging for the real reasons. Now, again, we're back to this independent women trope. And as I said, I never heard my mum talk about being an independent woman. My mum did everything. My dad wasn't in a space to do that. And there are some men that can do it and don't do it. Yeah. I get that. But you see this whole I'm an independent woman, no man can't chat to me, I got my own things. Okay, yes, you've got your own things. But when you look at your experiences and your trajectory, where you're always going to have that capacity to do that, because as much as women have a glass ceiling when they enter into the career society and get into their careers, they are seen as less of a threat when they walk into an interview.
Absolutely.
When you look at men going for interviews, there is this thing called stereotype threat that happens to people that consumes their being in the ability to perform in a manner without always having in the back of their head is, what is this perception of me being looked at? Mm-hmm. So imagine your counterpart being able to go into an interview and the only thing they've got to worry about is, am I going to deliver this interview? Whereas another man goes into an interview is like, well, are they going to see me as a threat? I'm black, I'm big. Am I going to be seen as a thug? And they've got to deal with that before even getting to the interview. So all I'm asking is for us as that independent women trope and the idea of not wanting or wanting a traditional male without still playing your role. I think that further consideration needs to be had in regards to how sensitive we are, how considerate we are, and how we as women portray ourselves in regards to our wants and needs without taking into consideration what's going on in other spheres. Because I think that there is a greater need for us to understand our male counterparts rather than just this man versus woman entity. I think that's where I'm at, to be honest, in regards to that, trying to still figure it out. I think we might need to go further into this. I think it might need a part 2. And I think I might need to delve deeper. Okay, so that was the independent women versus the traditional roles pod. And I think it was the first out of many. If you liked this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow Instagram, Love Laid Bare. And we are out.